both the speakers and the attendees are at an unusual time. So we are very happy to have Utku Unver speaking to us on blood allocation with replacement donors. And we go for 1 hour. Utku will take questions, clarificatory type questions as he goes along. More detailed questions should be deferred till there. Utku, all yours. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, these are unusual times, but these unusual times enable this nice interaction as well. So in that sense, it's very nice to be here. So this is a new project, a joint paper with my co-author Xian Han, who is also here at Shanghai University of Finance and Economics, and Onur Kestan, who newly moved to University of Sydney. So at the beginning, I'm going to give some introduction about blood allocation, because it's literally about our main application. Of course, we have a theoretical model as well, is about blood allocation. So it will be a market design seminar in the sense that I will give you some background about the specifics of blood transfusion a bit, and then I will give you a theoretical model we have. And in the end, maybe I will give some policy recommendations as well based on our model, if we have enough time. So blood components, which include red blood cells, platelets, and plasma, are the most used human body components in medical treatments. They are mostly used to replace or supplement missing components from blood. And transfusion is one of the most practiced medical procedures in hospitals. So World Health Organization strongly recommends that all blood is supplied by what they call, the technical term, volunteer non-remunerated donors, VNRDs, due to safety and ethics concerns. So these are people literally who you see in these blood campaigns come forward and donate. Many of them are like regular donors. They donate once in a certain amount of time. So they're not paid. And when you compare with other human tissues and organs, donating blood components is substantially less costly for the donor. A donor can donate, for example, red blood cells or whole blood once in every 56 days, 8 weeks. While donation of platelets and plasma can be made more often through a procedure called apheresis. So they just take these components and return the other components back to the blood. And these are the preferred methods instead of whole blood donation for platelets and plasma, because they can collect much more using this apheresis. Whole blood donation just gives very few platelets and plasma with respect to apheresis. But despite this, there is a worldwide blood shortage. Roberts et al. Report that 119 out of 195 countries in their data set do not have enough in their blood banks to meet hospital needs. And the need to supply ratio is around 1.1. So there's an over demand. So, and which countries are these? These are every country in Central, Eastern, and Western Sub-Saharan Africa, Oceania, and South Asia, and many others. So here's an example from India in an Indian news source. Okay, so India collected 11.1 million units of blood in 2016 to 17, meeting 85% of its 13 million units target based on WHO norms, according to a recent reply to Anupriya Patel, Junior Minister of Health, to a parliamentary question. So the blood shortage is huge in most of the world. Moreover, although it may look like this is more like a developing world problem, developed countries also have occasional shortages, especially in this kind of disaster times, like right now, when this blood drives are not done as often, or it happens regularly in summer months, this kind of shortages. So let me give a bit more information about donation practices, given this background. Basically, despite the WHO recommendation and low opportunity costs involved in donation, WHO reports that only in 79 countries, most of them are high income and then middle income, 90% of blood component supplies come from these volunteer non-remunerated donors. On the other hand, in 56 countries, there are some high-income ones, and there are 37 middle-income ones, and 10 low-income ones. More than 50% of blood supply comes from what's known, which I will talk today, replacement donors and other kind of family donors or paid donors. So, these include very populous countries, these 56 countries, such as India, Brazil, and Pakistan. Additionally, these replacement donor systems are used unofficially in many other countries, such as China, making availability of accurate statistics difficult. And there is actually a medical ethics and safety literature says that basically local authorities argue the use of replacement donors is as safe and ethical as VNRDs. So the same ethical principle applies. And it is the only viable approach, viable, ethically acceptable approach for mitigating blood shortages in many countries. So what is this replacement donor thing? Okay, so under a donor replacement program, a patient receives the blood she needs by bringing forward a number of replacement donors who are most likely family members, it's determined by regulations, or loved ones of the patient. And blood banks in different places use different exchange rates. So it's like a monetary system, if you wish, that determine how many donors are needed for each unit of blood received, according to the shortages at the bank, the patient's idiosyncratic properties, such as medical urgency or demographics, etc. So, in these programs, there are
Professor,
yes.
Can I just ask one quick question? This exchange rate, does it also depend on the blood group? Because some blood groups are somewhat rare than others, and
right. So that will be one of our proposals, of course. But as far as we know, when we looked at, there is not too many actual documentation about this. The ones that we could find, they are, which I will talk a bit more, are more like blood group blind. You just bring this many donors or etc. And that's absolutely right. You can actually, you should screen for certain blood types, but they don't usually practice this kind of, there could be some examples, but they have very various policies in different places.
Okay, thank you.
So this is exactly was going to be my first point. So this is one thing we realized, that one of the important shortcomings of these programs is they lack an optimized inventory management based on donor screening, based on their blood types, for example, and the needs of the blood bank. Okay, and in the rules books, etc., inventory management is denoted as an important goal for a blood bank, despite that. in the bylaws of many blood banks. And many of them use a fixed exchange rate between units received and supplies, regardless of blood type, which creates efficiency, fairness, and ethical problems sometimes, right? So certain patients may not be able to recruit the required number of donors that they're obliged to bring, making it difficult to receive blood. And then they basically, what they do is, in those cases, if it's an urgent patient, etc., they bend the rules. So the rules say something, but what they do could be different. So that basically creates a distrust to the system. Instead, if it's if we can propose a transparent, endogenous exchange rate policy, depending on the people's characteristics ahead of time, this may be everything will be in the rule book basically, and you can still accommodate people who maybe literally don't have enough donors. And of course, in the most severe cases, this gives to certain coercion and black market problems through which patients without donors pay others to be their replacement donors. So in this talk, within my time limitations, I will try to do the following. We will introduce this blood allocation with VNRDs and replacement donors as a novel market design problem. We will allow the possibility of endogenously determined exchange rates beyond the classical 1-for-1 exchange rate introducing as a new concept. And this concept will be what we will call it will be called a feasible schedule set for each patient, okay? Determined depending on the idiosyncratic observable characteristics of the patient and announced before. And given this background, we propose a new class of mechanisms that we call sequential targeting mechanisms to optimize and organize blood allocation. So the idea behind this mechanisms, to summarize, is we will have a lexicographic order of optimization targets and groups. Okay, for example, it could be first maximize the blood units assigned to urgent care patients. Subject to that, then maximize the units assigned to elective surgery patients. And finally, maybe minimize the use of blood inventory of the bank. So you can order these targets for a subset of patients in a row and do that. And we will show that this, if these sequential targeting mechanisms are defined appropriately, they will be parity efficient, and they will have very important, we think in this context is the key property also to sustain efficiency in application, or in equilibrium, if you want to wish, if you're a theoretical person. Donor monotonicity, so they will be donor monotonic. So what does that mean? That will mean that bringing forward as many replacement donors as possible does not decrease the blood received by the patient. So patients have the incentive not to hide any donor. So the more they bring, there's a higher chance they're not going to lose anything, basically. Okay. And and this will require some regularity assumptions on this object I told you before, feasible schedule sets. Although this looks like even from an optimization point of view, a difficult problem on some constraint optimization problem, we show that this also can be implemented in polynomial computational time. I won't have time to talk about this today, but basically the idea is you convert this to a linear program and constraints given by a totally unimodular matrix, and that can be solved. This integer program becomes actually a linear program, and linear program can be solved. Any solution of it is integer, and we get the solution. Okay. So our contribution are, I would say, threefold. First of all, we introduced this problem, this blood allocation problem. So I was one of the people who worked on so this looks like, in theory, some kind of exchange problems I worked before. So here we have this organ exchange, living donor organ, like kidney exchange. It looks like that. You bring a donor forward, and based on that, you receive a compatible kidney, and your donor donates to somebody else. So it has that kind of feature. But first of all, we are talking about really multiple units of blood here. And this exchange rate, which I will talk about, is not 1-for-1 necessarily in our model, and it has new details which are different, which I will talk in a little bit from these problems. And from a theoretical point of view, this sequential targeted mechanisms, this class is a proper superset of previously introduced efficient and strategy-proof exchange mechanisms in other domains of the sorts we looked into. So one of them is this priority mechanism that with Al Roth and Typhon Somez, I had a paper on, we introduced for kidney exchange, and this is the single unit demand. And recently there were two papers by Manjunath and Westcamp. So they study what they call a shift exchange problem, especially in nursing, this shift determination, and people exchange their shifts quite a bit. This occurs. So they propose a priority mechanism. So our just priority mechanism is just one mechanism in our big class. And Andersen et al. Also recommend for favor exchanges, or they call it time banks. And they look into a maximal mechanisms. So they maximize the number of things exchanged, and based on that, they create a priority mechanism among which maximal allocation to choose. That's also a sub-class of our mechanisms. And as far as we know, ours is one of the first papers that uses this kind of endogenously determined exchange rates in mechanism design of this kind of problems. So these are our main contributions. So let me give one more, a few more, a bit more background about blood transfusion. So on the left, this is from the UK government services, how the whole production line, if you wish, look like for blood transfusion. So initially the donation is done by recruiting donors. So this recruitment, so that's the phase. It can be volunteer non-remunerated donors, or it can be replacement donors. So we are not going to be interested in paid donors. In some countries they do allow, but not many, this paid donation. They donate, or it could be some kind of this apheresis system like platelets or plasma, although they didn't write plasma here also. And then these are collected and they are processed. So there's no simultaneous transfusion. You just receive the blood and then you process it. So it's quite unlikely that even if you have a compatible donor with you, that blood, that particular blood will go to you. Even if you bring that, most likely they will replace it with exactly the same kind of blood from the bank's inventory, and you will receive that one if you bring that person, because it takes time to process it. And there are three main components, and these three main components are collected as red blood cells or platelets or plasma. The advantage of plasma, is that you can freeze it and store it for a longer period of time than the other ones. And the shelf life are for red blood cells between 35 and 42 days. For platelets, it's between 5 and 7 days. But for plasma, it can be 1 to 1.5 years. Okay, and then this goes to the patient. So this is the basically production line of transfusion. And what can happen is that basically one of these three a donor can do, okay, not all of them at the same time. So he can donate his whole blood. So literally whole blood is for red blood cell collection usually, okay, and this can be done once in every 56 units. And this is an indivisible goods problem because they are put in some bags, and they are, so every bag is called 1 unit, and that's the language they use. It's about 500 milliliters of whole blood, but when you process it, the red blood cell count will be like 300 milliliters, okay, or 200 milliliters, depending on how you count it. So this will be 1 or 2 units of red blood cells. Or it could be 2 or 3 units of platelets through this platelet pheresis that can be done. And this can be done much more often. It can be done once in a week, and it can be done up to 24 times a year. And you collect much more like platelets than you would do through whole blood donation. Or you can donate directly your plasma through plasmapheresis, and you can do this actually twice a week, and you can donate according to their unit measurement 4 units of plasma each time. Okay, and of course, if we are talking about, which I will talk about, something called convalescent plasma for like treating COVID-19, probably you can donate at most 2 times because antibodies are that many. You cannot donate more than that. But if this is for some other reasons, this donation is for some kind of clotting factors, and there's a deficiency at the recipient, you can donate it many, many times because your body produces those clotting factors. And it is tested against viruses. Let me give you the nuts and bolts, and then I will move to the model. So there are basically 2 different blood type protocols. One is the ABO blood types. There are 4 of them, O, A, B, or AB. And the second one is determined with respect to the existence or non-existence of an antigen called RHD antigen. So you are called plus or minus, or RHD plus or RHD minus, depending on the existence or non-existence of this factor, this antigen. So there are 8 blood types with when you put them with different combinations, okay? And a patient typically needs multiple units of this compatible blood component for one-time use or multiple uses. You can collect it now, and like, for example, platelets are used like that. So this will be, depending on the patient's case, it will be typically your need is in a integer interval between a minimum amount and a maximum amount, and you don't have any use if it's less than minimum amount. It's better, it's okay if you don't get it because it cannot be used. But this minimum can be 0 in terms of, like, for example, platelets, or for some other kind of disorders. Okay. But that will be in this range, min and max. And max for platelets can be 7 if you're going to do every day 1 unit, and because it can be only stored for 7 days at most. So red blood cells, so it will be good to define them as for acute use and frequent use, because the compatibility requirements could be different in either case. If you are going to just get it once, it may be okay to get some blood type, but if it is like very frequent you are getting, your body may want to get exactly the same blood type as the patient. It may be more preferred. So that brings us to this compatibility. So what is preferred is for blood donation is almost always first go for blood type identical transfusion. So you want to get exactly, or O minus is designated as the universal donor, and it may be even preferred in some cases to identical, like in pregnancies when the baby and the mother have different blood types. And in those cases, O minus is the safest one to donate. Or when in an accident, in an emergency situation, so O minus is always in shortage. But if this is not possible, also ABO cellular or RHD compatible transfusion are done. And the rule of thumb for this is that O can go to A or B, which can go to AB, okay, in turn. Of course, O can also go to AB. And RHD minus can be donated to RHD plus, basically. So this, the rule of thumb is you can donate to somebody who does not have antibodies against your proteins. Okay, that's the idea about that. So O has no proteins, so you can donate it to A or B, and it can go to AB. The problem is why we wouldn't want to do it all the time, because no matter which blood product you get, maybe even like platelets, there will be antibodies are in the plasma of the blood, and antibodies are against the blood types. So when I am donating O, for example, I'm also donating A and B antibodies because it's part of my blood, and that can be harmful to the patient because it's attacking the own cells, own red blood cells of the patient. So if it's for frequent use, it's not a good idea to use something different than blood type identical transfusion. But if otherwise, it can be, although it is not preferred. So the same kind of rule of thumb will apply to other blood components. For platelets, they help with blood clotting, and one bag is equal to almost 200 milliliters. They have shorter shelf life, 5 to 7 days. So the acute use is to stop bleeding, literally. But for frequent use, they are used for chemotherapy patients and patients with clotting disorders. And again, we use ABO identical transfusion as much as we can. But if not possible, if this is not possible, again, ABO cellular compatible transfusion is done. But RH factor is not an issue in this case. So for all purposes, for this, you can assume there are 4 blood types, and you can go over that.
Professor?
Yes.
Just one quick clarification. In the case of red blood cell, so out of the 2 compatibility, the same blood group compatibility and RH compatibility, which one is more important?
So my understanding is blood type is much more important.
Is much more, okay.
Much more important, okay. And the other one, because I think antibodies immediately form against other antigens since birth, okay. Once you are born, it starts to build up. I think minus and plus comes a bit later if you are somehow exposed through food and etc. other things. That kind of antibodies come. So it is sometimes actually considered okay in very high emergency situations to go the second one. But the first one is never or ever violated.
No. Thank you.
That's very important. Yeah.
So I have a quick question here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of these components would be filtered from the supply, and then only that component is being fed, right, to the recipient?
So it's not going to be the same thing, but so it's not going to come from that particular donor. Most likely it will come from but that's the idea. You create only, basically a donor is, for all practical purposes, you can think that this person can donate only one component. basically.
Okay, okay. So, yeah. I mean, not more. I mean, it's not like you just take the blood and put it in the body of the recipient. That is not.
No. It's not going to be like that. Yeah. So you do it. You process it. You create these components. I mean, for example, if you're donating whole blood, you have to separate the red blood cells, and sometimes there are few platelets, but they can be used to pool with other platelet sources. Okay, I don't know what they do with the plasma in the whole. Is it disregarded totally? That I don't know. Okay, I think it's used still. They keep some of the plasma. But for the other ones, they only collect those components through a machine, and yeah, basically that's what they do.
Okay, thank you.
And finally, plasma is important in the following sense. Especially, it became quite important during this infectious disease period. So there is this widespread use, acute use of convalescent plasma, which means the plasma from a person who recovered from an infectious disease, because it has antibodies against that disease. And I'm sure you're hearing over and over again right now for COVID-19, for example, it's one of the proposed therapies is convalescent plasma therapy. So this is acute use. And a person cannot donate forever this. It's once or twice you can donate, but it can donate more than for one person, which is a nice thing about it. But there are also people who have autoimmune diseases. So plasma is rich with antibodies. So, it has other proper clotting factors. So people with diseases of these, they regularly get this kind of plasma from healthy people. So, and compatibility is very weird for plasma when you compare with the other ones. So you get ABO identical transfusion is the first choice. And if not possible, now you need ABO plasma compatibility. Remember, plasma carries the antibodies. Okay, so, and now this is very concentrated. You only have plasma in it. So this is actually very strictly done. So AB has no antibodies because AB has both antigens of the blood type. So it doesn't generate, the body does not create antibodies against the against its own antigens. So AB has no antibodies. So AB is the preferred blood type in this case. It can donate to A or B, but AB is very rare. And O is the least fortunate in the sense that O can only donate to O in that case, but O can receive from other, I'm sorry, most fortunate, O can receive from other blood types. And you don't need RHD compatibility. Okay. So let me go with the model in the remaining half an hour or so. Let me give you the theoretical highlights of the paper. So the theoretical model we have in mind is there's a set of patients denoted by capital I, and this calligraphic B represents the blood types, and a generic blood type is denoted by X. The way you want to think about blood type is actually blood type is not just one of those 8 A minus, but it's also related to the component, if you wish, of the patient's requires. So A minus of red blood cells is different from, if you wish, A minus of plasma in that case. So you can easily create, that gives 8 times 3, that many number of blood types for these 3 main components. Okay, so you can make it rich, but the idea will be that everybody needs one kind of blood type. Okay, so beta I is the blood type of the patient, and is compatible with donors of blood types in a compatibility set. So we don't specify exactly, it can be any arbitrary set, which is a subset. So the donors who have blood types in this capital C of beta I can donate to this patient, okay, without any problem. whatever protocol you choose, you can put in this C. But it is blood type specific. Again, blood type is our code name for blood type and component together.
Professor,
Yes.
just one quick clarification. Suppose if a donor, if a patient needs, say, red blood cells as well as, say, plasma. In that case,
so right now this model does not have that.
Okay. Single
Right
unit
now
demand.
we are maybe the easiest thing would be, maybe there's a one other way to think about it is that maybe there are different markets for red blood cells and plasma. I don't know how often. I'm sure it happens, but I don't know the exact
single
numbers.
unit demand.
Yes, they need beta I right now. Okay, it may be generalized. I don't know, but right now it's how it is. So they need to receive in a range a lower bar Ni and upper bar Ni of integer units of blood. Okay, so there's the maximum need, minimum need. They can be the same number. They can be multiple number. They can Ni lower bar can be 1, or that's the minimum they need. We give that kind of flexibility. And they bring forward a donor set, capital DI, which can be an empty set, such that any donor has blood type beta D in this set and can donate. For simplicity, we don't consider like 2 units they can donate. I think at most, or like 4 or 5. The way we are going to think about is each donor can donate 0 or 1 unit in this row. Okay. And there's also the blood bank. We denote it by lowercase b, and it has already an inventory, okay, of Vx units of each blood type X. Okay, so these are like, if you wish, VNRDs. These are the volunteer non-remunerated donor units, or units which they received from maybe previous executions of this mechanisms we are talking about and collected from replacement donors, etc. So they already have that, okay, Vx. So what's done like currently is that in many places there is at least this minimum guarantees can be met, okay? So the way we are going to model this minimum guarantee is basically it will be lower Ni, okay? Although here I'm saying that it is more like patient specific, okay, this lower bar Ni. It's actually the way we are going to treat is that if you bring a certain number of donors, I guarantee you to give you this Ni lower bar units. So I have enough inventory, running inventory to give that, okay? Then I set this lower Ni if I don't have enough numbers to 0, okay? In that case, I don't guarantee anything to you because I'm in a huge shortage, okay? So this is also, in a way, how the current systems are envisioned to work. If you bring me enough numbers, I give you this enough number of donors that you require, I give you your minimum. And then we are going to denote a problem by the donor profile, capital D, which is a collection of the individual donor sets of each individual brings, okay? And every other component here will be fixed for our purposes. So the exchange rate is, we should talk about that. It will be a part of the discussion, okay? In the living donor organ exchange literature that I've been a part of, and in practice of these living donor organ exchanges, for each organ the patient receives, one of her donor donates to somebody else. That's the idea. So there's always a fixed exchange rate. One received for one supplied. 1-for-1 exchange rate, okay? And in the literature, there's an extended literature in using other applications as motivations. This is also the way people have thought about all the time. There's no variable exchange rate. So, however, in replacement donor programs in the world, they use different and more sophisticated policies. For example, yes, many places still have 1-for-1 exchange. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, they use 1-for-2 exchange. You need to bring 2 donors because the contamination of donor blood with viruses is quite high in Africa. Okay, so they cannot use many donors. So in China and Cambodia, for example, at different places, they have different policies for if you don't have no next of kin, you may not, you don't have to bring any body. Okay, so in Delhi, for example, there is many for one exchange, meaning that all you need to bring is 1 donor, regardless of how many units of blood you are going to get. Okay, and again, there's like I mentioned, there's banding of rules. Although in paper these things are written like this, there is a certain degree of flexibility that the documents cannot capture, but it's apparent from surveys and discussions with the blood bank people that if the patient cannot bring forward enough donors, there is some idiosyncratic banding almost everywhere. So these exchange rates are planned. And there are even richer ones, which I'm not talking here, and they are specified verbatim that if you bring this, if you do that, etc. Okay. So to remedy this, we will consider a construct called a feasible schedule set. Okay. So let me introduce this. So this is one of our innovations in this paper. So let's first define what is assigned to a patient. So the patient is in a mechanism or in a world like this, they are going to be assigned a schedule. What's a schedule? It consists of 2 numbers, okay? Integer numbers, R and S. So basically R is the units the patient receives, and S is the total number of units her donors supply. So we are going to ask the following question: which schedules are feasible for a patient? And we are going to define a function. This could be a policy variable, or this is exogenously set in the rule books, bylaws, etc. This will be a calligraphic SI will be a feasible schedule function for patient I. Okay, so we will say that a schedule RS is feasible for donor set capital DI if RS is in the feasible schedule set for these donors, if it's an element of capital SIDI. Okay, so of course this is very abstract, this function. This could be any discrete valued function it looks like. Of course, we will, as we go along, we will have to put in some kind of regularity assumptions because not all our assumptions yes, there will be some regularity assumptions will be needed. But for now, we don't impose any. So this picture, I'm going to use it often, is to see the way to think about these problems. I will put the received units to the horizontal axis and supplied units to the vertical axis. Okay, so each of these grid points is a schedule. So 1-for-1 exchange, let's say the patient needs between NI lower bar and NI upper bar in this graph, okay? But she brings this many donors, the cardinality of DI donors to the system. So 1-for-1 exchange says that all of these are feasible in my system. You don't get any and you don't donate any. So 0-0 is in it. 1-1. So for each additional unit you get, you have to give 1 more donor. So this is the classical 1-for-1 exchange feasible schedule set looks like. Of course, as capital DI changes, this function will be still tracing the 45-degree line grid on the grid. However, it can get longer or shortened, but it will not exceed upper bar and I. So it will go up to this point on the graph. Okay, so it will be capped by capital DI. If the capital DI number of donors is less, it may come up to here. Oh, sorry, up to here, up to here. It can be truncated there. So this is how it looks like. Okay. So this is like the Delhi policy. So in the Delhi policy, you are supposed to supply 1 unit, regardless of how many units you get. So these are the feasible points. Okay. Of course, I may not be able to give all you need, just I can give you your minimum as the bank. I may not have any, but as long as you bring one, that's your feasible point. Okay, those are the ones. Okay, so this is the feasible schedule set for the Delhi policy. So, but we can allow more elaborate ones. You can look, if you wish, convex, discrete convex sets like this. For example, this is an example in which anything inside and on the boundary, on the grid, are feasible schedules, okay? So this is what I mean by endogenous exchange rates. For example, if you get 3 units now, giving 3 units of donor is feasible, or 4 units of donor is feasible, or 5 units of donor. So it will be determined endogenously within the system, but these are the feasible exchange rates. You cannot go beyond that. So when I say exchange rate, that's literally endogenous exchange rates, that's what I mean. And here, an outcome of a problem will be an allocation, and allocation has basically an integer vector alpha. Alpha xi is the x type of blood the patient I receives, okay, the units of that. So that will be an integer units. Alpha D is an indicator, 0 or 1, whether that donor donates or not. D donor donates or not. And it has to satisfy the market clearing condition. So what is the market clearing condition for each blood type X? The cumulative units of X blood received by the patients should be less than or equal to the inventory of the blood bank of X, plus the donors that, the replacement donors that are used to supply, okay, that's the clearing condition. And the feasibility condition is that the units, the total units received by the patient and the total units donated by her donors should be a feasible schedule, should give a feasible, it should be in the capital SI set. So this is the feasibility requirement.
So each DI can supply only 1 unit. Is that the assumption in all of this?
So this is an assumption in the model currently. Okay, we didn't really go beyond that. But for example, for platelets, they can donate more than 1 unit. 2 units they can. Even they claim it could go up to 3, but 2 is more. For plasma, it can go even to 4 units. You can donate 4 units. So for now, like it's more like red blood cell. You can donate 1 unit of red blood cell. So this is the usual. But yes, so maybe in the future we can include that too. But for now, this is how we envision it. Okay. And let's say alpha I is the cumulative units the patient receives, okay? And then we will assume there are some preferences associated with schedules, okay? So we will assume that they are lexicographic, so receiving a higher quantity of blood is always better, okay? But subject to receiving the same quantity of blood, yeah, I would like to bring less units of donors. So fewer total quantity of donors brought forward is better. So this creates, if you wish, so there are no indifference curves in this world, but there are indifference points, and this literally orders the whole set. Let's say this capital S is all the units this person can receive, this set given in this picture. So it is bounded by the total number of donors and the upper bound and I. So the increasing direction of the preferences are given by these arrows. This point is the minimum point here, minimum according to preferences, and this is the maximum point according to the preferences. Why? This is the maximum number of received, the minimum 0 units donated. So that's the best point. But since it's lexicographic, you always trace upside down and jump to the next one once you hit to 0 donors. So this is the increasing direction of preferences. So this is what you should think, how the preferences look like. And actually, you will see here, donation is not as costly. The only important thing is just bring them to the hospital. That's actually, when you talk to people, people just coming to the hospital is the cost, basically. Okay, almost. Okay, there are some beliefs, of course. Education is important. There are religious beliefs against it. Those kind of things exist. So it's maybe more than that. Those opportunity costs are more than that. Literally, like receiving more blood is the more important within your interval of things. Okay. So in this world, we will assume the full donor set is going to be a private information of the patient, and a mechanism is, so people are going to bring forward, if you wish, it's like direct mechanism. They just declare their donor set, and the mechanism is going to assign an allocation for each given donor profile. Okay, here is my incentive property. A mechanism is donor monotonic if hiding any donors from the system does not increase the quantity of blood received by any patient. Okay. So let me stop here for a second. So if you hide any donors, you are going to lose in terms of units of, or you will receive the same amount. Okay. That's under a donor monitoring mechanism. Of course, preferences are also over the units supplied. So I'm going to, but as we argue in this paper, this is not like organ donation where you go through a surgery to donate your organ. It's okay. It's a minor disturbance to donate blood, of course, but it's not as costly. Okay, so donor monotonicity is, I think, a pretty good incentive property here. But we will nevertheless talk about strong donor monotonicity if hiding any donors from the system does not make any patient better off. Okay, so in these terms, when you hide, even if you receive the same blood, you do not donate less patients. Less donor units either. Okay, so that's that additional quantifier here, which doesn't exist in donor monotonicity. Okay, so the motivation is, like I said, donor donation is substantially less costly than other organ donation procedures for the donors. So we think that donor monotonicity is a plausible incentive property for the patients. It also makes patients' individual incentives more aligned with the blood bank's possible objective of maximizing its inventory. So this is the shortage, just mitigate the shortage, okay? So it's more aligned with that, okay? So like I said, here the problem is it's not that the blood banks don't ask for additional donors. They don't ask the patients that, okay, bring me your all donors, just I'm gonna choose among them. They don't do that. Instead, what they do is just bring me whatever donors you find. That's, I think, an important problem. So a mechanism is yes.
So when you're talking about the set DI and when you're talking about this compatibility set, I feel there has to be some relation, because when we are saying that the set of donors does not matter, then the diversification of the set of donors who are coming in, shouldn't it directly impact the compatibility set of a blood type that is available? Because if you're not basically diverse...
Exactly, what you receive, so this SI set, the feasible schedule set, is a function of the donors, not the number of donors you bring. So that can be designed by the blood bank.
Right.
Okay, accordingly, okay, but I'm giving all the flexibility here. Okay, the assumption is you have this minimal amount in the bank to get their minimum needs. Of course, if that is the case, you're saying that minimum need maybe should be 0. I should not guarantee any units. If I cannot give them anything. And that's allowed in our case. Okay, so, and depending of your DI set, if you bring more O- donors, then you may get a more favorable donor feasible schedule opportunity set given to you, and you can get a better. Okay, so absolutely, and okay, so it depends on many factors in that sense. So right now, it's only a function of the donors you bring, but it can be also tied to your own blood type. We can make it a function of the blood type of the donor, patient, and the donor set brought forward by by him. I think that's going to be better in the future.
Yes,
but
that
right
was
now,
my question. Yes.
Yeah. Right now it's like that, and you're right. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Utku, since you're running short of time, I'll give you 20 minutes more. Would that be okay?
So I will give you the mechanisms. I won't have too much time to talk about it, but yes, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes. So a mechanism is parity efficient if for each donor profile there is no alternative allocation that makes every patient weakly better off and at least one patient strictly better off. So this is the very standard efficiency thing we are going to consider. But nevertheless, we are going to look at refinements of this, possibly like maximization of units received, etc. That will be also in our possible objectives that we can achieve. So it's not just parity efficiency. So this is our mechanism class. So basically, we are going to introduce a class of mechanisms such that each member of the class is induced by two parameters, where the first parameter is a sequence of patient sets. So each of this NK is a subset of the whole patient's I, okay? And this K is our number of steps, if you wish, K upper bar, K equals 1 to K bar. So these are the people for whom we will consider some welfare criteria in step K, for each step K, okay?
Are the sets disjoint?
No, they are not disjoint possibly. They can be together, you will see, okay? Actually, they won't be typically disjoint, but there will be some regularity condition needed. And there is a second component, which is tau. So this tau function will be what is your optimization target for current step K. So initially, the first optimization target is what we call max optimization target. The first step always begins with max, but basically max means that the total quantity of blood received by the patients in the current target set and K will be maximized, okay? And min means that the total quantity of blood donated by the donors of the patients in NK shall be minimized, okay? So that's the meaning of min. So min means you are going to receive as little blood as possible from your donors, okay? But we start with max because of lexicographic preferences that people first care about for efficiency reasons, yeah? But the way it goes is that first we satisfy max, and among all the allocations which satisfy, let's say, tau 1 objective, then we are going to look for tau 2 objective and its corresponding set, okay? So basically, given a donor profile, we will construct a sequence of subsets of allocations, beginning with A0, calligraphic A0, and going to calligraphic AK bar, okay? And we are basically beginning with a large set, and we are shrinking this set as we go along. Okay? Although this description looks like you have to look every allocation, like I said, you can do this in a fast computational time using a linear program, but here I'm just going to focus on the economic description of it, okay? So we start with capital A0, which is the set of all allocations, all allocations for this problem, and we will end with a subset of allocations, AK upper bar, I will call this is the outcome set of allocations. So any allocation in this set, I can use as my outcome. Okay. So formally, this is how we define it. So A1, capital A1, is the set of allocations which maximize the total units of blood received by the patients in capital N1 set. Okay. And as you go along in step K, tau K is, if it's a maximization objective, it's going to be the subset of allocations AK, which maximize among the AK minus 1 set, the received units by the patients in NK. And if tau K is minimum, then it's going to minimize, we are looking at all the allocations that minimize the AK minus 1 within AK minus 1, the blood donations by the donors of the patients in capital NK. And we'll make two assumptions on this target set. So that's the question, okay? So we are going to assume that the last two, let's say the number of patients is given by the cardinality of I, okay, 2 times cardinality of I, target sets will be literally singleton sets. So there will be only a single agent's objective is done in the last 2 I of these steps, okay? And each patient will appear only once, twice in this last 2 I steps. They will appear once through a maximization target and once with a minimization target, okay? And before a patient is ever included in a set with a minimization target, she should be included with a maximization target first. So that's the reason we start with max in step 1. So the first assumption is guarantee that the outcome allocations all welfare equivalent. So the last one is basically, the last 2 I are like tiebreakers, if you wish. We are breaking ties among who will be prioritized, and it creates welfare equivalent. So you can have multiple allocations in the end, but they will be all welfare equivalent for the patients, okay? And the second assumption guarantee is basically the efficiency of the mechanisms. You first do maximization, then minimization for a patient. But you don't do it alone, right? You do it within a target set. So our first result is that under these 2 assumptions, the sequential target, so I'm not going to even call these things assumptions, they will be in the definition of the sequential targeting mechanisms. Sequential targeting mechanisms are Pareto efficient, all of them. Okay, so it's not that straightforward like just the priority mechanism, because these target sets can have overlaps and omissions. So you have to really take care of that. Oh, okay, so there's some typo here. All right, so we will make, for the incentives, we will make additional assumptions on these feasible schedule sets to begin with, okay? So the first one will be a convexity assumptions. But we cannot use plain convexity because we are talking about discrete units here. And there are 2 mainstream definitions of convexity in this literature. One is called M, Matruit convexity. The other one is L, lattice convexity. It turns out, for our purposes, lattice convexity is the correct one. Basically, it says that take any 2 points, X and Y in a set, okay, and look at their midpoint, okay? So if this midpoint is an integer vector, yes, that should be in our set. But if it is not, you basically round it up or down. Rounding it up should be in the set. So it's the one here, this is rounding it up. And the other one is the rounding it down. That should be also in the set. So these 2 points should be also in the set in the graph. Okay. So this is what it means. So this is lattice. So basically, given any set, discrete set of integer vectors, this operation literally converts the lattice or L convex hull creates a lattice of integer vectors. So that's the reason it's called the lattice convexity. Okay. So our first assumption will be each feasible schedule set is L-convex, okay, for any given set of donors. So these are examples of L-convex sets. So most important thing is that the slopes of the sides in the real line projection could be 1, 0, or infinite of these sets. So they should be always northeast oriented. That creates the lattice idea, okay? Because integer lattices, according to greater donor equality, are always oriented toward the northeast, okay? And at most they can have 6 sides. So this is the one in the middle. The picture is the 6-sided one. They always look like that, or like the ones on the left or on the right. Okay, they look like that. So this is L-convexity imposes. Okay, the second assumption, I'm not going to go through, it's technical, but basically it says that there's a feasible positive price for each unit received. What does that mean? If we can, so there's, let's say there's a base schedule in the feasible set we are assigning to the patient. Let's say that we are going to increase the quantity of blood a patient receives. And this is also feasible. There's a way to do it in the feasible exchange set, feasible schedule set, okay? And then it means that there is also a feasible schedule we charge this patient more. So there is basically we can additional one more donor. If she can donate, if there exists such a donor, there is a feasible schedule like that. Not that we are going to definitely charge her this positive price, but it is feasible to have that. That's what it means. Okay, and this, the same for decreasing. So geometrically, this means the following. So in this graph, look at the top, flat top of this set. Okay, and look at the leftmost upper corner. So if you go, so that's a feasible schedule denoted in blue. So if you go to the right, that's also feasible schedule. It's in the set. So you're increasing the units received by the patient. So there should be a schedule in which this person donates more. So it should go up to this point in the arrow direction. But that's not in the set. So although this is an L-convex set, this violates this feasibility of positive price. Okay, so basically flat bottom and flat top for a feasible schedule set are ruled out whenever possible. However, this is okay. The one on the right is okay because you see you're already charging this guy all of his donors at the top of this set on the rightmost graph. So this is not going to violate this assumption because it's not possible to increase how much donors you can charge for this person. But the middle one is violating because it is a flat top and a bottom. Okay? So this does not violate as another example.
So is it fair to say that the diagram on the right-hand side is the most general kind subject to this restriction to cardinality DI intersection?
Yes, yes. So either at the top or at the bottom. So there is non-negativity constraint and non-positivity. Yes. So within that, this grid, so you intersect this shape with this grid 0 to DI cardinality times NI lower bar to NI upper bar grid. So that's it should be like that. Or it can be just 0, 0. 0, 0 is by itself can be feasible. Okay, that's also feasible. Yes. Okay, but these are all for fixed DI sets. Okay, what about as I change my DI set? What happens? As I change my DI set, the idea is that when I declare more donors, if I'm giving a much less favorable donor, like feasible schedule set, of course, I'm not going to bring more donors. I have no incentives to bring it. So at least the favorability of the feasible schedule should not decrease. So we define a favorability notion. Okay, the favorability notion say that, let's say there are two sets, S and S prime, capital S and capital S prime. These are feasible schedule sets. So capital S is weakly more favorable than capital S prime when you have a set of donors DI if basically RS is a feasible set for S prime, okay? There is a feasible schedule where you donate less and receive the same amount under capital S, okay? So there exists RS prime such that S prime is less than or equal to S. And of course, whenever, so it has more quantifiers, but that's the idea, okay? So, and let's say now RS is in capital S, and receiving that R units is feasible in capital S prime, then there is a feasible schedule which enables to donate more for the patient and receive R. So there exists a S double prime greater than or equal to S such that RS double prime is in capital S prime. Okay, so that means capital S is weakly more favorable than capital S prime. So basically that's the assumption we are going to impose. Okay, if as you bring a superset of donors, your feasible schedule set becomes weakly more favorable than previous. And this, and geometrically, this will manifest itself as this capital SIDI becomes either an expansion of the previous set or it's a downward shift of the previous set, or a combination of these two, okay, in the direction of receiving more blood. So this is an example in the picture. When you are bringing less than or equal to 2 donors, you don't get anything because you have to bring, okay, this is 0. But once you start to bring 3 donors, this becomes your feasible donor set. And at 4, the third figure becomes, and at 5, the fifth figure becomes. So it is an expansion and downward shift from the bottom. I'm sorry, from the top and bottom. You see, so these are this arrows gives the direction how it goes. The sets goes, both expansion and a downward shift. So this is a schedule which satisfies assumptions 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and 1-for-1 exchange satisfies all of them. Okay, basically, like I said, it just expands on a single 45-degree line, or basically as you bring more donors, more feasible allocations are, but it's just a single point, a fixed exchange rate. All right, so the idea is that under these assumptions, that's the main result, a theoretical result. Assumptions 1, 2, 3, sequential targeting mechanisms are donor monotonic. Okay, we also give conditions when there is strong donor monotonicity. Since I'm running out of time, I'm not going to talk about that. But a sufficient condition is a 2-part tariff. You can give a 2-part tariff. 2-part tariff is you first charge a fixed lump sum amount to supply the minimum amount, and then for each additional unit you want to receive, you need to bring 1 more donor. That 2-part tariff kind of schedules work, but you can still have, so that's the beauty of it, endogenous exchange rates and still have strong donor monotonicity. It's not in the presentation, but we have results in that direction. So so you make assumption 3 a bit stronger and you get that result. So basically it says that it's a downward shift, not expansion. It needs to be a downward shift. And there could be some coincidences, they can just hit at some points, but it should be a downward shift basically, and that gives the result. So in this case, this is only two-part tariff. And we get also comparative static results. So this, because this is a complex animal, both feasible schedule sets and this sequential targeting mechanisms, basically if you move a group of agents, if you relegate them to a lower tier in the optimization, if you move them down, you make them weakly worse off. Okay, so always being handling higher in your steps, that's better for the patients. That's a comparative static for the sequential targeting mechanism. And in the feasible sets, for the fixed donor sets, if you make your feasible schedule sets weakly more favorable, again, that patient becomes weakly better off under the same mechanism, fixing the mechanism. Just change only that patient's feasible schedule function to make it more favorable, and he becomes weakly better off in terms of receiving more blood. So I should be careful in that. Okay. Okay, so I won't have time, but we can accommodate many of things which are done in reality using this. It is complementarity to our proposal of this convalescent plasma. So there are these voucher programs. It works in tandem with those complementarity to this program. So I will provide the slides and people can go over this if they are interested, but I'm out of time, so I'm going to stop here. So let me give a brief line about this. So the related literature is not too many, but there is incentivizing blood donations. There's a literature in empirical and experimental economics by Bob Slonim, Mario Massis, and their co-authors Lacetera and Garbarino. And this is also related to these organ exchanges that I've been a part of. And it is multi-unit. We had a paper about dual organ exchange. It's kind of related to that. It's related to other incentive schemes of blood donation, like the ones I have another paper with, which talks about that, which is quite different from this one in terms of the incentive scheme. And in the theory literature, it is mostly related to this literature spanned by Bogomolny and Moulin based on compatibility-based matching markets. So either you are compatible or not, your preferences rely on that. And that has been extended to multi-units with some monotonicity as more is better idea by Manjunat and Westkamp, Anderson et al. And Haris Aziz has a paper about incentive compatibility. What are the sufficient conditions for incentive compatibility about that? And finally, there is one paper about transplant center incentives in kidney exchange. They actually advocate. So what they do is two transplant centers, if I use one of your pairs to exchange, I give you a pair next time around. They say this should not be 1-for-1. There should be a value, there should be a price attached to, depending on the desirability of this pair. And they propose a scheme. It's not a real mechanism, but a market-based system. You get points based on how valuable the pair you give to the other transplant center for kidney exchange. So in return, you get that many points, and in the future, you can use your points to buy pairs from other centers for conducting exchanges. So that's nice. So that's kind of in tandem in that. So I want to stop here. Thank you very much. I think I'm 3 or 4 minutes above my time, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, Utku. So we will take questions for another 5 minutes or so. So let's see.
So I have a question to ask. So if I'm correct, what I understood from the presentation, this had somewhat a flavor of static optimization in the sense that given the demand and the existing stock, and that's how we will allocate the these
good.
exchange
Yeah.
rates. Isn't that will be more interesting or maybe more useful in the sense to think about what could be the
Yeah.
demand in the next day, and then how to, in the sense, so
So
maybe
I
you
wouldn't
are.
say it's more interesting, but it is important to think about that as well. So in the sense that our procedure is quite, so there's a inventory management literature in operations research about blood banks. There is some literature on that, not too much, but there is a bit of a literature they look into. Of course, they don't look at this replacement door, but it becomes, so they look at like some kind of queuing problem, right? Queuing and inventory management kind of problem. And you can certainly do that in this setting, but what we propose, actually, you can implement this in practice as follows, okay? So first of all, donation and transfusion are never made simultaneously, and this creates a lot of flexibility in implementation. And how it works is that they ask a patient, if he's an urgent care patient, they immediately give the blood to him. And then they, if that person can provide donors, usually people are very good following promises. It turns out there's literature, okay? Their relatives come and donate later, okay? This happens. This is how it is implemented in right now, the replacement donor programs, okay? So we propose exactly the same thing for urgent care patients. You don't even need to run this mechanism because there is always this minimal inventory is there, and this minimal inventory is literally there for this urgent care people, okay? Otherwise, this minimal inventory doesn't have any meaning. For these urgent care people, we just use the inventory system, and later on it's supplemented, but okay, and the idea will be you maybe run this mechanism daily or bi-daily for, so many of these things are for, like, many people come for elective surgeries, so they can schedule their surgery. And there are lots of patients which do not have non-urgent needs for future, like these are regular people who have regular blood needs, for example. They already have usually an inventory for future. They are coming that, okay, I'm running short. So they can, you can just tell them, okay, this is my schedule of donors, and this is how much I want. And then you can run this system daily or by daily. So that's the way we envision it. So it is not 100% online, it's not 100% offline, but it's a combination of two, because the same result would come if you put these urgent care patients to the top of the wait list and you have this minimal already assumption-wise, minimal inventory requirements. Then you can just give them without running the mechanism. They will always be met their needs. And then later you can, when you are running your mechanism, you can consider their donor requests, what the donors they bring forward in the mechanism to the other people who don't have time urgent needs. But I agree. So there is a follow-up paper here about other details of dynamics. All I know is that dynamics doesn't matter in kidney exchange, that I'm 100% sure. But here the problem is a bit different, okay? Or in practice, it doesn't matter. I have a paper on that. Other people say it's almost, you can do like in greedily, and as long as you have a large pool to start with, nothing, you don't gain anything, okay? But here the problem is a bit different. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So can I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, if you put in the properties of efficiency, donor monotonicity, and the comparative static result that you have developed, and maybe assumptions 1 to 4 are also assumed, then what else would be necessary to characterize the class of sequential target mechanisms? I mean, towards that direction, you have some thoughts already?
So the thing is, it's going to be probably very difficult because there are lots of tiebreakers usually in these mechanisms, which are a function of things that you may not realize right now. Okay, those tiebreakers play a big role. They basically create very interesting priority structures. They can create trees, they can create other things. So I don't know the results. I don't have any idea. But gut feeling is they may look like sequential optimization. My gut feeling is.
I mean,
But
broadly,
I have
right?
no idea. I don't know that. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. That's my gut feeling. It could be a weighted optimization, maybe. But then I'm not sure how donor monotonicity would work. It may be violated. So that's a good point. I don't know. I have no idea.
So your algorithm seems to be more general than for this problem itself. I mean, because you don't seem to be using those blood compatibility and all those details in the algorithm anyway. So it seems like a much broader algorithm.
Yes. So we couldn't find I think this is an application which it fits very, very well. And we couldn't find any other application which fits as well. There are some applications like these other two papers applications. It fits. They think about like shift exchanges, like you want to change your somebody else as a nurse, for example. This is done very regularly. This is a big problem. Okay, so this kind of idea can be used. And there's this time banks on the internet. There's this time banks.
People come with some endowments and this needs
Yes.
to change and so on. It seems like these things can be applied. So
Exactly, they could be. But this is how we started in mind as this blood allocation, and this turned out to be the most major application. Yes, there are some. It fits almost well, but there are absolutely questions. You are right. But it fits almost very well to this, especially for platelets. If we, or I'm sorry, for red blood cells, it really fits really well. For platelets, maybe a person can donate more than 1 unit, etc. It's a bit less. Yeah.
So the other question is, there is this Hieland-Zeckhauser pseudo market equilibrium mechanism. So, I mean, what would be an analog of that in this model? Like, have you thought about it? It seems like
so that's
and so on, but you can always create the pseudo market and try to clear the market with that.
Let me tell you the results that I know that other people have talked about. Okay, so the problem is endowments creates impossibilities. What they do is instead you have to always inject some money to the system. What is the money? Some fake points. Okay, so everybody begins. So recently, Federico Echenique, Antonio Miralles, and Jun Zhang, they have a paper. They look at with endowments when you have the injection of money goes to zero, okay, in the limit, but still it should be there. You get some equilibrium existence possibilities, and that you get some endogenous exchange rates. The others, like Eric Budish has a paper, they all have like fake money in there. Without fake money, you cannot get existence in this process. So that's the tension here, and it's an open question with multiple units, and of course here the utility functions are not there, right? Here utility functions are 1 or 0, and they are. I think submodular utility functions would work here if you think about it in terms of, or I'm sorry, sub-additive, or whatever the correct word is in this domain. I think they could work here, but I don't know the exact domain how it would work. But that's a good question. That's another direction it can go. Yep.
What is the open problem you were saying, Professor?
So it's about it's about probably this if you have endowment, okay, can you create a pseudo market where you trade probabilistic units of your donors? So the outcome will be a lottery in the end. But you can trade 1/3 of one of your donors to 2/3 of donors of somebody else, or something like that. It will be a probabilistic outcome in the end. So one thing is for blood allocation, you need literally some kind of exposed individual rationality or something like that. I would assume that could be a problem in that world. This is usually ex ante individual rational, those kind of things in this domain. Or like, yeah.
Is there any other questions?
Just a very speculative remark. I mean, I would have, you know, in a model like this, one would have sort of felt, you know, that there's some way to formulate it in terms of fairness or envy-freeness or something like that. And of course, indivisibilities create problems. But as you said, you know, this Buddhist 2011 year EF1 and all those kinds of things, which are approximate competitive equilibria from some.
Right. So you can generate that. Right.
So is there a way of actually formulating your objective function that way? I mean, I was thinking about it, but I can't, you know, the urgent care guys, I mean, everybody will envy them or something. I mean, I don't know what the,
so
what is if there is any way to do it at all in that fashion.
So there will be some priorities for sure. I mean, maybe within the priority classes, there is no envy or something. You can create something like that because there will be priority classes in this kind of problems. Medical priority is an important issue. But yes, that's a good direction. I totally agree. That sounds very nice.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Utku, and thank you everyone for staying up for so long. And
thank you very much, and thank you for your patience. It was this was the first time I presented this. I hope there weren't too many problems. Yeah, and it is work in progress, and we don't have the final draft yet. We are getting closer and closer. But we are going to incorporate some of the points I've talked about, but which are not in the presentation to the paper before we
look forward to the paper. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So the meeting ends here. So, but there are 2-3 meetings, as I said, private meetings which people will have. So
okay.
But
so
yeah.
Do I stay online or
I think you stay online. I request everyone who is not scheduled to meet to leave, and rest can stay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks to all the 3 authors. They helped us in the questions.
Yeah. Also, we were having
all the 3.
Chat box, which was very nice.
Yeah, Onur wasn't there at the beginning, but did he come? I don't know.
Yeah, he did come.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure.